Hello and welcome everyone to the whole podcast, episode 2. I can't believe we're here. I'm so very excited. It's been kind of a whirlwind of a week, but I am so very blessed and excited to be bringing you such great content with some amazing guests. But for the first time ever, I'm going to introduce you to your co-host of the whole podcast going forward, Mr. Shaggy D.
Well, thank
Woo!
you so much, Rothy. Appreciate being here.
So what Shaggy does is a lot of the background research and helps me put a lot of the stuff together of the content that we're bringing, here for you guys to see and take a look at. So he's super awesome at it, and he's going to kind of be our little background voice at times. So if you hear him, that's who it is. Okay. But without further ado, our episode 2 guest is probably one of my favorite people in life. I'm not saying that just because she's my guest. I'm proud to call her my friend. But she is, I always say that when I try to tell people about her, like I literally don't know how to describe her, right? She is a quantum entanglement specialist. She has been an intention and integration coach for ketamine therapies and programs. She's also a fellow numerologist, which is so funny because being a numerologist, it's hard to ever come across people that I can talk numbers with because it's its own language really, and she's one of the few, and we never talk numerology because I've got so much else to talk to her about. But she's a light worker. I call her like an alien angel because I'm convinced like she's not fully human. She's just out of here. She's an amazing energy to align with. I love her to pieces. So without further ado, please welcome my episode 2 guest, Angela Kirkham.
Hello. Thanks for having me on, Sarah.
You're so welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Let me see if my computer, there we go. There's her pretty face. All right. And of course, we have Shaggy D in the corner there as well. But thank you so much, Ange, for joining me. I knew the moment that I was going to do this podcast, I was like, I have to get her on here. Shaggy, how long have I been talking about Angela?
Well, ever since you and I started talking.
Yeah, it's that sort of a deal with my friend Angela. I have a ton of questions for you. I know that when you and I talk, when we have our consults and our mentorship sessions that we've had before, we go in so many different areas and directions and into so many different really deep spiritual topics, which is what I love about seshing with you. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and start out. I've given you kind of my overview of who you are. Why don't you tell my audience a little bit more in depth in your words about who you are and what you do?
All right. Where to start? A little bit of background on me and why I do what I do today is in 2006, I experienced a spontaneous healing, a spontaneous remission of debilitating sacral back pain that had been a part of my life every day for almost a decade. And then once I got my head and my heart straight, really what I'm saying there is I collapsed a crystallized belief structure that was deep in my subconscious and was genetic and ancestral and had just been coming down the line. My mom had the back pain, my grandmother had the back pain, and when it made its way to me, I always tell people, like, if it's yours to heal, then it began with you. Everything ends where it begins. The ending often looks like the beginning. And so as this came into my space, I seemed to be able to deconstruct it pretty quickly. I mean, I had it for 10 years, but that's because I was so conditioned with the ways of the world, and I was trying to go about it the same way that we are all conditioned. I went to dozens of doctors over that 10 years, and every one of them wanted me on pain relievers. It didn't resonate with me. I just kept thinking, man, I'm only in my 20s. Why would I get on pain relievers? Am I just going to be on them for the rest of my life? And so I never filled those prescriptions. And I just kind of started to decide, if they can't figure this out, I'll figure it out. Like, that's a pretty bold statement because I was seeing doctors, right? And when we visit people of authority, then all of a sudden we turn all of our power over to them because they have the authority. And so I took that power back, and I started to truly believe that, like, I can find the answer. And so I started to study mental, emotional health and intelligence and awareness, and started to understand how trauma causes these or deep emotional impacts cause these belief systems. It can be trauma or deep emotional impacts. And that was what had happened to me. But it really just awakened in me something that already was existing. And so I had it in my DNA that I could, take on this form of this back pain. And I did. And so it all came through really quickly, but it had to come from, I had to kind of tap into it on this. You talk about me being a metaphysician or metaphysics. I had to understand that believing is seeing, not seeing is believing. And that's what I kind of teach people is the last 2,000 years, the age of Pisces, that was seeing is believing. Because Pisces is actually very much made up of illusion. Anywhere Pisces shows up, even in astrology, it's all about daydreaming and fantasy and the illusory and what's kind of clouded from our vision. And so, of course, in that time frame, that last 2,000 years, we would live by, I'll have to see it to believe it, because we were all actually living in very much of an illusion. Now we're in Aquarius, and it's flipped, and it's to believing is seeing. So the moment you can believe something at a deep level, you'll start to see it. And I've experienced that over and over and over in my life. And so that's kind of got me into what I do now. I'm a mindset coach. I'm a consciousness shaman in plant medicine journeys and things like that for individuals. And then I'm also, I just refer to myself as a psycho-spiritual guide. So very much metaphysics. And I have enough of my logical side working too that I can usually go out and find proof for why I'm saying what I'm saying or believing what I'm believing. But I don't always feel like I have to. Like, I operate from, hey, it all makes sense. I got it. I understand it, and I don't need to prove it. So I usually trust my intuition over the physical proof that so many people seem to want to have, if that makes sense.
For sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. It's always I'm literally taking notes. I don't know how many years I've known you now. I'm taking notes, and I know you. It's like it's always something new with you, yeah. And something deeper. And that's what I love about our conversations. And I know we really haven't talked about this in depth because, again, you and me, we go deep. Numerology is kind of like old hat to us in a way. We're like, oh, okay, we know that. It's not really a lot of fun to talk about for you and me. But what I am interested is in hearing your take on, because I call numerology, like, I call it the framework to the simulation, because it's everything, Mm-hmm. Everything is energy. We quantify energy through frequency and volts, amps, etc. And those things are quantified through numbers. Therefore, everything is numbers. And so that's how I try to make it make sense to my followers and my clients and people that I'm teaching about numerology. How would you put that in your words? Like, how would you explain what numerology is and how it impacts us in our reality?
Well, actually, very much the same way you just explained. I'm aware that we live in a holographic universe. And so, again, everything's energy, energy's everything. And numbers is God's language. And when we start to understand that, we get into sacred geometry, we get into even the measurements, of what is the most feminine shape is a circle. What's the measurement of a circle? What's the most masculine shape, a square? What's the measurement of a divine square, and how that circle fits within the square. And then you can even get down to the measurement of a seed. And the seed is the Vesica Pisces. It's what everything is born from. And so, when you get into these measurements, you start to get into these numbers, because the numbers reveal what that is. Like, there is a measurement for the Vesica Pisces is 153. And And just a fun little side note, I mean, I came across all of this just out of sheer curiosity and intrigue and wanting to know, right? And my name, my vibration of my name is 153. And then I realized, oh, that's because I was the seed inside my mother when my mother was inside of my grandmother. And I am the Vesica Pisces of that wound. Does that make sense? So
Yes.
why could I get to the bottom of it? I was actually plucking out the very core of that seed. And so we can, I do that with people in their gematria, and that's where you can like look up your own vibration, because you came in as a seed and you are a specific vibration that's going to attract to you everything you're in vibration with. So once you look up your gematria, you can now look up all these phrases and words that are in vibration with you, and you are truly attracting them. You might not attract all of them, or you might not be aware of attracting all of them. But even within mine, there's so many phrases that I am like, oh, that's in vibration with me. No wonder I experienced that like a year ago, that same exact thing that it's talking about, because that's what's perfecting us or helping us experience the fullness of our creation, like the full flowered version of ourselves from that seed, is we have to go through all these experiences, and we're attracting them to us as we're blossoming and growing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's, excuse the cat. Another thing is, you're bringing up gematria. So what would you say, like, of course, my love is Pythagorean numerology. It really is just what I teach and talk about. It's my foundation. And of course I go to Gematrix or and the websites that you took me to last time, which I do want to talk about those in a few. But what would you say is gematria versus Pythagorean, and where would somebody best use either one?
Well, so within numerology, let's just go there for a minute. Numerology, as you and I know, comes from your name and your birth date. So you take the letters of your name and you get their numerical value. And then all of a sudden you have that part of numerology, which a lot of stuff in your numerology comes from your name, either the vowels or the consonants or the whole thing. And then in numerology, though, we also look up the life path through your birth date, so you're looking at all these numbers on both sides. And then now go to astrology. Astrology is strictly based on your birth date. Doesn't take into consideration your name at all, but there's so much that's held within your astrology that it will blow your mind if you actually learned astrology and realized it's written in the stars. Everything you're going to experience is right there, and it's on your chart, and it's coming to pass. Yeah. And then now, so you've got astrology, this piece that's just your birth date. Then you have gematria, this piece that is just your name. And what's fascinating is both give you all kinds of clues. And I'm just all about self-awareness that there are tools out there. And one of the tools I love lately is human design and gene keys. And those come off of your birth date as well. They're part of the I Ching, as well as astrology and some ancient technologies. And in that's what helped me understand why do I get all these numbers and all these letters so much? And it just seems to come so naturally to me. And trust me, it wasn't like my jam when I was younger, but I was very deeply conditioned. But as I've grown and got curious, I realized as I looked up human design, I'm a mental intuitive, and mental intuitives are about 2 to 3% of humanity. And they actually have outer authority, where you hear other people like, oh, my instincts told me, which is in your spleen. My gut told me, that's in your solar plexus. My heart told me, I could feel deeply. I don't have an inner authority. In other words, my authority of intuition is outside of myself. It is the universe. And I can take and see all these pieces and go, oh, wow, that's telling me something. And so it's in putting to get all the information together and then it making sense to me, just like someone else's intuition would maybe only make sense to them. Like, I don't know why I feel this way. I just do. And I'm not going to do that thing, or I'm going to go do that thing because my intuition told me. Mine is everything out here just told me what I needed to know. And I might not ever be able to explain it to another person sometimes. Sometimes I can.
Angela,
But
may I ask you a question that might help relay it?
yeah.
Okay, you remember that scene in The Matrix where things finally slow down for Neo, and he's able to hold up his hand and just kind of pick the bullets apart and let them fall away?
Yeah.
When you see the numbers and the codes and all that stuff, does it feel that way for you, being in this 2% of the population? Is that what the numbers have looked like for you after a while?
No, not so much. I get more of a sense of, especially lately, of timelines collapsing. So it's
Okay.
like the more aware I get, it's like, well, that just collapsed, and that issue or that thing just it's no more. It's no longer. I don't know how to explain it to another that doesn't. The fun thing about that outer authority of intuition is actually everyone could get there, because everyone is a part of the universe. It's the super consciousness. And so when I've mentored individuals or I've taught them, they start to see it in their own life. They start to go, oh, now I'm getting the breadcrumbs that the higher version of me just left myself. Like, here's a fun example. Like, when I moved into this home I'm in now, our next door neighbors are named Steve, Emily, and they have a son named Zeke. Well, my husband's name is Steve. His first wife was Emily, and his dad's name is Zeke. And I said, what are the chances our literal next door neighbors have that name? And when he came in and told me he'd met them, I looked at him and just intuitively, I said, that's interesting. Did you heal all the way from your first marriage? Like, I don't understand why that would be showing up in our space. Like, you're going to see them every day, and it's going to make you think of that, because that's what was on his was coming out of his mouth. When he came in, he goes, isn't that weird that we're next door neighbors to people that have like all the same names as my family and my first wife? And I go, yeah. And I think it's probably pointing you in the direction of any deeper healing you can do around your first marriage. And he's like, huh. And it just kind of like, but that's that outer authority, that the breadcrumbs are like always there, they're always there. And we set ourselves up this way. We designed our experience, we really orchestrated it all. So if we can start to believe, I'm the creator of my reality, what breadcrumbs did I leave myself? You'll start to see them everywhere. But you have to kind of develop those eyes to see and those ears to hear those little bits of information that way. I don't know if that helps, Shaggy, but that's
No,
like
thank you.
bits of
I really
information, right?
appreciate that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you bet.
what it brings to my mind, and I was literally just thinking about this, and I'm finding this to be a theme on episode 2. Episode 1 was the same thing. I'm meditating beforehand, and I ended up, calling out something that I had no clue about. But what came to me was the moment I realized that my higher self, right? We've always heard that higher self, but how to connect with that higher self, and who is that higher self, and what's the proof of that, and where did that come from? Like, how do I resonate with that, right? Like, I knew I always believed in it, but I never had acknowledged or realized an engagement with my higher self until recently. And by recently, I mean like less than maybe 5 years ago, probably, since I've been in Dallas. And, so within my 40s, so second half of life, probably, I'm realizing who is my higher self. And the moment that I understood who that was, it was because I had gone back to memories in my life of me replaying really cringe moments, like stupid things that I had said or things that I had regretted, that just like shame, that self-shame that a lot of traumatized people deal with, and replaying those things in your head and kind of like hating on yourself for it, And I did not realize, but my entire life, when I would do that to myself, I would verbally come out and say, and I didn't know it for years until recently. I would be like, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And then I caught myself doing this a few years ago. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm saying I love you to myself. And then I realized that was my higher self telling me, I love you.
Yeah.
I love you through those cringe moments and helping me to realize that is just stop doing that to yourself. I love you. You are worthy. I love you. And it was such a revelation to me. I mean, I know it was, you know, the first time that you and I ever had, it's been since then, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that was a huge, huge thing for me. And that's such a hard thing to have, that actual physical um, experience where you can connect and say, oh, I had that. I know for a fact through personal experience of what that is. It's not just a saying in my mind. It's not just something I believe in, but I've never really seen. Like, it was at work in me naturally. And it also, another thing that really came to mind with that is I'm going to I'm going to fulfill my purpose, right? Whether I realize that I am doing it or not. I chose to come here and I chose this path. I chose my numerology chart. I chose my traumas. We talked about this in episode 1. It
Yeah.
was a great moment with my girl. I chose all of this.
Yeah.
Every bad experience, every heartbreak, every pain, every loss. I chose it. It's hard to like come to, but that's the truth. And the more that I understand and accept that and realize that I've got my higher power helping me and going along with me, that was just such a great moment for my personal awakening, and something that I've kind of been wanting to talk about, and that just spurred that in my mind. So I had to interject that.
Rothy, may I ask a follow-up question of you? And maybe
Absolutely.
Angela can kind of interpret it.
Yeah.
Um, that it's really remarkable when you come to that realization of I chose this, therefore I'm going to own it and I can move forward with it. So would it be kind of like that shift where someone's, instead of saying, why is this always happening to me, that person has a shift and they realize, why is this happening for me?
Yeah.
And what can I do about it to allow it to happen for me even more or even further?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also taking control, taking control in letting go. And I know you know what I mean by that, Angela. It's like I'm taking control by letting it be. And I'm no longer allowing it to control me. That sort of mindset with that, and the acceptance of who I am and how I am, and just knowing that I have this like twin with me. You know what I mean? And that's my God self. That's the piece of soul fabric of source energy that was cut away and put in my flesh suit when I was born. You know what I mean? And so that's the person that's the real me, you know, the higher self. And I think that when you come to find that, it is an acknowledgement of you do transition from the victim to the victor and the one that is in control. And then you learn to start manifesting the things that you want in your life. And it's not perfect. I'm still learning it. You know what I mean? There's some amazing people that both me and Angela know that are just like manifesting wizards. They're amazing at it, and I want to get to that level. But it's a journey that they had to go through too. But once you can get to that acknowledgement of like, hey, I'm accountable for my thoughts, for my actions, and all of this. And I can actually make something wonderful of my experience. And I can also, and I think that this has been a theme of a lot recently, is I can also embrace the pain and I can choose the pain and understand that there is silver lining in all of it, that it's all purpose, and that I'm to learn something from that and grow. And I'm going to be that much stronger as a result of it and that much more able. And what I love personally is the fact that it builds me in such a way where I can relate to others and help others to understand that too. Especially when dealing with trauma and people that have dealt with a lot of trauma, that's where I find that I'm most helpful, because I'm such a traumatized person. You know what I mean? But uh, but it's blessed because that's part of my purpose. And so I hope that answers that question.
No, that's great. And you gave me a couple other places to dovetail off of down the road.
Perfect. Angie, any further thoughts with that?
Well, what it causes me to think of, yes, it's happening for me. It's like what Michael Singer, if you guys are familiar with him, and the surrender experiment, and surrendering to what is, because we did plan it, we did create it, and this is like a real hard reality check for people who are going through trauma, things that are really, really hard. I choose to take this other viewpoint and say, we're all creative beings. We all created, like you said, I created my own numerology. I came in when I wanted to come in, and my birth was really planned by myself so that I could be imprinted and impacted by the energies at that time. And so it is like a whole new look at what does it mean to be creative? Because if you even created your own birth time and place and location, man, we're creative because you created everything after that. And so if I created this, wow, I am pretty creative. Like, I look at my own life, and I've shared a lot of things with you and all these little insights that I see in my reality and go, wow, that's super funny that just showed up, because I can see what it's telling me. And people laugh at my stories and they're like, how do you have the eyes to see all that and know all that? Well, it was going on before I even realized what my human design was and all of this. But I've laughed and chuckled sometimes. I'm like, I'm just really creative. But it's fun to be able to look at my life that way, that I created this, and that's where my creativity shines. And sometimes, yes, I'm a writer and I've done a lot of other things that are creative, but never once do we really say, I created this. I created the traumas I'm going to go through. I created all of this, because behind all those traumas is a superpower. It's a gift that will come because I went through that really hard, difficult thing. And when you can start to look at it that way, I'm creative. Hey, I created this. It's really hard when you're going through the hard stuff. But if you can just gently remind yourself, you're going to come out on the other end a lot more empowered. And like I said, these superpowers show up after you've gone through something really hard, difficult, traumatic, call it whatever you will. It's really, you orchestrated it so that you would awaken some deeper awareness and power, personal power inside of you. So I think of it as creativity.
I love
Wow,
that.
that's awesome. And Rothy, I had an aha moment because you mentioned and some of my background, Angela. I
Mm-hmm.
I've been a DJ for 31 years. So, like with song lyrics and like kind of connecting all the dots, if you will,
Yeah.
sometimes Rothy will say something and it'll lead me to like a specific song lyric. And lately, I'm like, okay, let's kind of expand on this a little further. Rothy, you mentioned a few minutes ago that we choose our own painful moments and we choose those hard moments. And you mentioned to me when we came up with the name for this podcast, I'm like, yeah, I just heard Alice in Chains is Down in the Hole. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's like my favorite band of all time. And another Lane Staley lyric for you, if
Okay.
you will. My pain is self-chosen,
I
from
love
his Mad Season side project, River of Deceit. And when you mention that, like, okay, I'm typing in the lyrics, and then came up on Wikipedia that Lane Staley read the book The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, which is one of my all-time favorite books. But he said he felt in the Mad Season project, he wasn't on a musical mission, he was on a spiritual mission.
Makes sense.
And that he came, when he was writing lyrics, he came from that paradigm of, I'm on a spiritual mission. Whatever I have to put out from the depths of my soul, I'm going to put it on paper and put music and set music to it to see if it resonates or vibes with the listener.
Yeah.
And
I love that. And I think it's, especially just knowing Lane Staley's story, he was really a very integral figure in my dad's life too. My dad was a big rock and roll guy. And he wrote a song and recorded a song after his passing and about him. And I think that it's a beautiful, and again, going back to episode 1 with K Fox, there was a moment where, I said, we're special souls, we're brave souls to have chosen. Some of us, have gone through really crazy things and we chose that, and you would think, why would I choose that? But it's all a part of the bigger picture and the bigger purpose. And choosing pain specifically, I've seen a post recently that said, if there were 3 words that you could tell your younger self, what would those 3 words be? And everybody's like, putting all sorts of, invest in Bitcoin or all these sort of things like that you would normally think about. And the thought that came to me was, choose your pain. Choose your pain, because it's coming. You can choose the pain of working out every day and putting your body through that, or you can choose the pain of being unhealthy and having disease and hurting and arthritis and bad joints. You can choose your pain. You can choose your pain of not being able to go out and have fun. You can choose your pain of facing your traumas and feeling to heal versus using vices or numbing them through drugs or, other addictive, bad, behaviors. It's all about choosing your pain. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest and best, wisest pieces of advice that I've ever heard in my life is choose your pain, because it's going to be there. And I think that, granted, with this belief system, I would have known that in my 40s I would finally get there. But if I could tell my younger self something, that's what it would be. It's just such a revelation to know that you got to embrace it. There's silver lining to it. There's lessons in it, and it's a part of who you're supposed to become and your full purpose. So,
see, I would say that what came to me really immediately when you said, what's the 3 words? You got this. Like, that would be my words. You got this, because we did choose this pain. And, we hear it said often, pain is the portal to bliss. And I like to emphasize that there is no increase in consciousness without pain. That's the price we pay to increase our consciousness. And so there's a price paid for everything. And when we realize that, all you got to do is look at your physical life. You're paying a price. You're handing over the cash or the credit card or the whatever. You are paying for things. So just translate that now into your consciousness. You're paying for your consciousness to increase or expand, and so anyway, I think that that's beautiful, explanation that you shared, because choose your pain, that puts you back in choice, and when people feel like there is no choice, that's when it hurts the most. But when you can say, no, I'm still in choice. I talk with people all the time, especially right now, after we just ended this eclipse season. So many relationships are crumbling, and it's because it's actually written in the stars. Like, truly, on a collective level, we just, a lot of stuff just came up from a lot of shit that was hiding in crevices. Call it in your body, call it in your spirit, in your soul, whatever. But everything that was hidden was brought to the surface as we went through this Scorpio and Taurus eclipse season split. And in the end, we were in Scorpio, and it was bringing stuff up from the very, very, very deepest caverns possible, deep family secrets, your own secrets, pain, and it was all coming up. And so now these sides of people are showing up in relationships, and the other person or both are going, I can't do this, I'm not doing this anymore. And these people like that stay attached to what was, or attached to the old story, it's far more painful than for them to just say, you know what, this is crumbling. And rather than trying to take the bricks and keep putting them back in the building, and that's just coming down faster, you might as well just like let it crumble. There's probably something beautiful on the other side, but you're too afraid to see, you're too afraid to go to that other side of that pain. But
yeah, I love that. And one of my favorite things, I'm not a tarot reader or anything like that, but of course I'm familiar with it. But the Tower card, I talk about the Tower card all the time, the Tower moment. It's just like, there is the sun after that. There's the Wheel of Fortune after that. There is the renewal. There's the Phoenix rising after that. So you want that to come down. You talk about timelines collapsing. Oh my God. Like, I feel them. I see them. That was another theme of earlier today while I'm meditating, was timelines collapsing. I almost probably put it in a question. And I feel like that's a huge part of what's been happening with regards to my question number 2, which I'll put this here. I haven't been putting my banners like I'm supposed to. I need a producer. It's all right. We're going to go organic. Okay. So like this recent mass awakening, would you attribute that to and before we go into this, let me adjust myself here and I'll edit this out. But okay. All right. So this recent awakening, I feel like, you out of there, Shaggy? Okay.
Yep.
We got to keep him anonymous. Okay. So
yeah, I turned on the light for something and like, oh my gosh, and all the irony isn't lost on me. Angela, you mentioned about allowing the bricks to crumble and fall.
Oh, how funny.
Here I have a brick wall behind me, and we're talking, and we're going with this convenient segue of dark to light and mass awakening and stuff. And it's like, oh my gosh, I put the light on and now I'm exposed. Oh, turn it off. Get scurry back into your corner. And those are the choices that so many of us, ironically, are having to face at the moment.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty it's pretty apropos. I think that, I mean, from my observation, this is just something that, of course, in my own personal experience, a bit of my background. I've always been somewhat of a spiritual person. However, and I need you to lay down, please. Lay down. There is a big line of demarcation in my timeline of when I moved to Dallas. That is when my big awakening started to happen. That is when my spiritual gift started to happen. And I have also heard from others in recent years that they have been discovering spiritual gifts within them as well that they've never had. Some, my age, some maybe a little bit older, some younger. But I've heard it called the Kundalini awakening. And I've heard of that before. I'm not too familiar with that. I've heard you speak on it before. So tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on that. And if it is the Kundalini awakening, what that is, or why these people like myself are developing out of the blue these spiritual gifts and abilities like psychics,
Yeah. So I would say that like right now we're going on a mass level, we're going through a mass awakening, and it's really awakening from the dream. Like I talked about that Pisces age. Well, after Pisces, it actually is over the 12th house in astrology. After Pisces comes Aquarius, and Aquarius is it's not even a water sign, but the sign for Aquarius is water. And it's because we're all born of water. You're coming out of the womb. You're coming out of this, this old life or what has been, and you're being born new. And so we're all going through it right now. We saw it with COVID. We've seen it with the last election. All these things are just like, if you're not aware that there's something massive going on, then you really are, in no judgment, but you're just really not paying attention. Because the more you pay attention, the more you notice, and the more you notice, the more you experience. And because of that experience, that deeper experience, people are tapping into gifts. They're saying, oh, wow, like I am starting to realize I feel energy differently than I ever have before, or what I've been aware of, or their clairs are opening up. They might see things that they couldn't see before. They might hear things that they couldn't hear before, and sense things. And so I would say that the opening of gifts is part of the awakening. Now, Kundalini in and of itself really is, and now this escapes my mind. What's the name of the medical sign that has the two snakes go up? And do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's always associated with hospitals and stuff. Anyway,
Yeah.
the whole point is it has two snakes going up this staff, because those snakes represent the masculine and feminine energy coming into balance. And it starts actually up in your pineal gland and your pituitary gland. And then this dimethyltryptamine, this energy, and this fluid flows down your spine. It rests at the base of the spine, which is in your sacrum, for 2.5 to 3 days. And then it will rise again if it's not excreted. So through sex or other things. And so a lot of people that are practicing sexual restraint and things like that, especially, I've literally only heard real life stories from men. They're like, oh, I'm onto this. I'm going to like practice meditation and be very conscious and not masturbate and not have sex. And then they feel a surge of creativity at the end when it starts to rise back up. Now, with Kundalini awakening comes that Kundalini rising. And mine was in my spontaneous healing in 2006. That was a result, because mine was in the sacrum. It was as though my sacrum had been stuck and all this energy had been coagulating there almost, and just staying there and causing this massive pain. So I have heard it, not just because it's my story. I've read it in many, many books. I've heard from a lot of people that often a Kundalini awakening does come with some pain, and often back pain, low back pain, because your back is your foundation. It's what's, you either are built on a firm foundation or a very rocky, sandy foundation. And my belief systems up to that point were very, very unfirm, not firm. And so after that, it started to make me question things in a healthy way, not put my belief in things that really was outside of myself, and turning my power over to something or someone that wasn't, of good, and keeping it with myself, and realizing my personal power. Now, I've heard of some people who've had the back pain for just a couple of days, and they're like, oh, and then it released. And again, I don't think that it's always back pain, but it is usually some pain. As we talked about earlier, pain is the portal to bliss. Pain is an increase, it will come previous to an increase in consciousness. So you might have pain somewhere else. Maybe your pain is stuck in a different energy center in your body. I know that right now women are really being encouraged by universal consciousness to open their throat chakras, to start
my God.
their truth, right? And men, it's their heart. Because a lot of men, because they're not mothers, they don't have that womb. Whether you've had a baby or not, you still have a womb, and you have this universal love that's guiding you as a woman. But men, they'll usually generate their energy in their solar plexus, and then they start to believe that's where all their feelings exist, because they're really aware of a power they have in their solar plexus. And they're like, oh man, when I listen to my solar plexus, when I allow myself to be guided by my solar plexus, I feel deeply. And it's like, well, if you can move that feeling up to your heart and crack your heart open and get rid of all your heart walls, you're going to feel even deeper than you do in your solar plexus. So you're going to feel much more power and love, and like the full spectrum of vibrations or emotions. And so that's trying to open up for men as the heart chakra right now, as a collective. Now, I'm not saying every man is in a space where their heart's not open. And I'm not saying every woman's in a space where her throat's not open, but I can't tell you how many women I know who are going through massive, like one of my best friends. And then I just met another woman recently who I can't even think of what their situation or their diagnosis is called, but their vocal cords literally start to close off and their air cords, everything. And so they have to go in, and there's no pain reliever for this, but the doctor has to shove something down their throat to stretch their throat open again about every 6 months. And they're like, it feels like you're getting waterboarded because you can't breathe, you can't talk, you can't say how bad it hurts. All you can do is just let the tears just run out of your eyes. And they're like, it is so painful. But my friend who's having that done has seen a past life or another timeline where she was in shackles and had even a thing around her neck and was like a slave, like a sexual slave. And I'm like, yeah, doesn't surprise me. You're collapsing all these timelines to get rid of the narratives that don't include unconditional love, right? And we're healing them.
I talk about another, I'm not surprised that this is happening with you because it's you. But talk about another theme, literally that has been for the past week and a half or so. And Shaggy can tell you, and I'll admit, I for the first time in my life, cold turkey quitting nicotine. And I'm a vice person that I've used medication to do it before, and I've quit several times throughout the years. I never thought in a million years I could do it cold turkey, and I'm doing it. I'm like day 9 right now, and I did that because I have just been getting the worst pains right here. I'm putting iodine on my like thyroid. I'm putting like apricot kernel oils. I am like worried, but I'm also like, I'm not going to be worried because I've had the feeling and the sense that this is coming from something that happened recently, be it the solar flares or whatever is making the Schumann resonance wonky right now or in the past week or so. There's something super intense right now and the past like week to 2 weeks, and I have felt it all right here in my chest, in my back, but especially right here in my throat area. So the fact
So
that
are
you're
you
saying,
talking kind of below your ears and down the sides of your neck?
yeah, yes,
Okay, I got one for you. Sarah, did I ever tell you about the Stella procedure?
no,
Okay, so this all came to me about a year ago. It was pretty fascinating. Anyway, 2 years ago, I had a lump removed underneath my ear that grew to be the size of a golf ball. Now, most of it was inside my neck, so you could just see this lump on the outside that didn't look that big, but when it started to make my face go numb, I went in and I found the right doctor who could remove it, and he was very skilled. Every other doctor was telling me they had to cut my cheek open in 2 spots and I would have these big scars forever. But this guy literally cut along the lip of my ear and then up the back of my ear and lifted my ear and then pulled it out. And so you can't even see a scar anymore. And but shortly after that, about a year later, I was the name Stella, this is so funny, just kept entering my space like over and over and over. Again, this is this outer authority that I have. And so one day my friend tells me her dog's name's Stella. Then the next day, another friend tells me that her higher self is named Stella and she figured that out in Bali. And then I'm talking to another friend of mine on the phone and I told her how Stella just like, there was a couple other situations and I tell my friend, Stella just keeps showing up in my space. I don't know what's up with that name. And she goes, I can't believe you're telling me this right now. She goes, my beautician was here this morning doing my hair for 2 hours. And the whole time she was here, she told me all about the Stella procedure. And I'm like, really? I think I need to understand what the Stella procedure is. She goes, well, what it is it's a procedure and it's done in ketamine clinics. So this happened to come my way while I was working with a ketamine clinic. And she said, it's a procedure to help you get rid of PTSD that is stored in the neck. Now, I personally believe after all the downloads I got about it, that the Stella procedure, like we know trauma is not only stored in the neck. I believe the trauma that is stored in the neck has to do with your throat chakra. It has to do with whether you feel like you can speak and call for help or say what's going on inside of you or whatever. It has to do with what you're hearing and speaking.
Yes.
And so she tells me all about the Stella procedure, sends me a video about it. She's like, yeah, my friend like was telling me she's taking her daughter in for the Stella procedure. And I said, thank you. I needed to hear that. So as I looked it up, it says that it's actually, the longer name for it is like the stellatna ganglion blocker. And then I knew immediately what I had removed. When I asked the doctor what it was called, he kept giving it this long name, and I asked him to shorten it. And I just said, what is it really? He's like, it's an entanglement. And I go, okay, but it's an entanglement of nerve endings. And when I looked it up again, because I'd forgotten what he called it the year before, he said it's a stella ganglion cyst that you had. And I'm like, okay, this all came a year later after I had it out. I'm learning about the Stella blocker and the Stella procedure. And so then a week later, I'm holding space for a number of individuals in plant medicine, and one gentleman, he's in having his journey, and he came in with this tick in his neck that he just was constantly like ticking. And I knew that was a trauma response. And while he was in the medicine, and I checked on him, I have everyone in different rooms, and I checked on him and I said, how are you doing? And he goes, can you come talk to me for a minute? I said, sure. And I said, what's up? And he goes, so I think I have spirit guides here talking to me, and they told me that my trauma's all stored in my neck. And I go, they're probably right. This happened like days after I learned all about the Stella procedure. Wow. And he goes, so what do I do about it? And I said, well, let's talk when you're out of the medicine. And so he could just continue to get what he needed to in the medicine. And when he came out, I said, I need to tell you about the Stella procedure. He went and had it done. This gentleman had horrible tics, like they were like every few seconds. And it's been about a year, a little more than a year since he started on his healing journey. And all of his trauma responses are almost gone now. He has like healed dramatically. But I knew that wasn't by chance, that this all came flooding in, not just for him, but also for me to be aware that instead of me getting the Stella blocker done or the Stella procedure done, I actually had the whole thing removed. And it was a ganglion cyst, but I don't believe it was even from this timeline. I believe mine, because it was never cancerous. It never had anything, even though it grew there for years. It wasn't actually causing me anything other than it got so big that it had to be removed. And I know it has to do with my husband right now, because it grew rapidly the moment we met. It was just this little tiny thing that had stayed tiny for like 6-7 years. And then all of a sudden we met and it just grew quickly. And I knew that in another timeline, it has to do with me and him. But you may want to consider looking up the Stella procedure and getting that done if you're feeling like it's something is stuck here in your neck. I know a few people now I've told about it, and they've had great success. So.
Yeah, thank you. And I have absolutely felt that it's in relation to my throat chakra. Me, you knowing me, especially on social media, this is funny, but not saying my full, you know me, I speak my piece, or I seem like a person that speaks my piece. I don't feel like I speak my piece enough. I think that's what it's coming from. And I think it's also me in past timelines not speaking my piece, and that trauma or that wound kind of coming back up again and trying to clear itself through something else that's going on right now. I feel a lot of, maybe that's what that sun flare thing was doing, is I heard it's burning away the old stuff that doesn't serve you anymore, and it's burning that stuff away. And so I have kind of noticed that with other things. But I knew and I sensed that it had something to do with that. I quit smoking no matter what, because I wanted to do that anyway. But it just another one of the things that's getting burned away is my paradigm that, oh, I need some sort of medication or assistance to do this. No, me and my higher self can do it, and so we are doing it. And I'm blown away by it. And at the same time, I'm like, why are you surprised? That, like, you already know this stuff, Sarah. So, but I think that in this, you were mentioning something earlier, and it kind of segues me to my next question. Last year, I had gone to I'd been on another podcast with Sam Tripoli. He has on Rockfin something called Zero, podcast called Zero. We were talking about, spiritual things, and I had mentioned the 144,000 and something that I believe to be the case, which is, no, ma'am, no, I'm sorry, I have my mom's dog here. You need to sit down, please, or you're going to go in your crate. Okay, you got to sit down. The 144,000, basically, what I had learned was we have 72,000 genes or genomes in our DNA strands, right? 72,000 from our mom, 72,000 from our father, 144,000 total, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless you get, which we know changes the DNA. And it puts another 72,000 in there, which then becomes like what, 226? I'm the numerologist is bad at math, but 200 something thousand, right? Versus the 144,000 that it's supposed to be. So my interpretation of that is that the 144,000 spoken of in like religion and stuff, I'm going to go ahead and change the banner now. My thoughts on it and personal belief is that it is not a number of people or a sect of religion or this nation or this race of people, but that it is having to do with those who are still coded as gods, as human. And those are my thoughts on it. It makes sense to me, and it makes sense that that's why they would choose to change that about us. And also with that, right previous to this, there was the queen who had her birthday, and this was when she put her hand upon a crystal ball, and then the 3-strand DNA lit up in her court. I'm not sure if you recall seeing that or not, but in my mind, it was kind of like a symbology to what all of that meant. So, and I know a little bit, of course, about, you shared with me before, your upbringing and faith stuff and all of that. If you care to maybe talk a little bit about that and how you came to your awakening, and maybe what your thoughts are, kind of like an overall Angela religion, section of the episode, because that's totally interesting as well.
Oh, it is totally interesting. All right. Well, let me speak to the 144,000 is the tetragrammatron. So again, if we go back to sacred geometry, that's the number of God. So if you have your full tetragrammatron, your full geometry, then you have this God code. And if you don't do something else, that's going to alter that. And yeah, there's a lot of altering of that. I mean, we know, and maybe this comes as a shock to some of the listeners, but human beings have been being experimented on since the beginning of time, and so have animals. and so if you think that human beings aren't still being experimented on, you want to just kind of maybe pay more attention of
Well,
how
that's rather dumb, so to say, because that's what goes on in these dumbs. It's human experimentation,
totally.
and oftentimes the most perverse and insane forms possible.
Yeah. And so with my little background on religion, is I was raised Mormon. I grew up in Utah, and deeply seeped in it. It's what my parents were. It's what their parents were. And I know that in my family line, it includes people that came across the plains as Mormon pioneers to settle and seeking religious freedom. And where I am now today, I do believe that these big box religions especially are very cult-ish, that, if you don't believe as they believe, then, and you start questioning, then all of a sudden you're the bad one, you're the wrong one. And so I am the only one in my family, in my immediate family, that has left the religion. And it wasn't just willy-nilly. Like, I had lived all over the country. I was surrounded by many incredible people of all different faiths and sects. And as I moved all over the country for about a decade before I decided to leave religion all together. And it was actually coming back to Utah after I went through my divorce that again, that decade was when it was right after my spontaneous healing. We moved out of state within the next year or so, a year or two. And then with all these moves, I was just getting more and more aware of the energy I feel and the exchanges I was having with people. And so coming back to a land where it's very seeped in Mormonism and a lot of people believing those same ways, the only way I can verbalize it was the energy was so heavy and the judgment just hung in the air. And why? Well, if you don't know what Mormons believe they have all the truth. Therefore, everyone else has it wrong somehow. They have something wrong about what they're believing, but Mormons have it 100% right. And so because they believe that, they judge a lot. Like they have a certain way they're supposed to dress. They have a certain way they're supposed to act, all these different things. And so when I'd walk out my house with a sleeveless top on, you could feel the judgment. Like, why aren't you wearing your garments underneath all of your clothing? That you couldn't wear a sleeveless shirt without your garments on. And then they're just judging even their own fellow Mormons. Like, oh, you're drinking a hot drink. You're not supposed to drink hot drinks when you're Mormon. But guess what? They all drink hot chocolate. They just don't drink coffee. Like, it's just funny where the lines are. And I just started like really seeing and feeling the heaviness of all of it and just thinking, this is silly. Like they can't even see that the way that they're judging others is all based on these deep beliefs, and it's really taking them into a negative space. So then I did some research around Utah, just because like I said, I'm a little bit logical and I'm a bit metaphysical, and so to see, why did I feel this way? Why was I so strongly impacted by the energy here? I just literally went to the internet and I'm like, hey, and I started Googling like statistics for different things that people struggle with, and found that at least at that time, Utah was the highest in porn addiction. It was the highest in teen suicide. It was the highest in pharmaceuticals for like anxiety and depression and mental issues. And you guys, and the list went on and on and on. And I was like, holy crud, if they got it all right, they sure got a lot wrong. Like, and it just made me just laugh. And I'm like, there's no way. Like my spider senses are really on point right now. And, I can share that with friends that are questioning, and so many people are leaving religion across the board, not just Mormonism, but they're realizing all religion is playing this, we will be your go-to between you and God. When you need to come to realize an awakening is you are the one who gets to connect to your source, not anyone else. You don't have to go through someone. And as that spreads and people really start to believe it and let go of their belief systems, religions really are crumbling, because people aren't going to pay their money into these big religions to support something so that they can tell them how to live and what to do and how to think, and when you really have to take all that personal power back.
Wow. So, Angela, that was awesome, because what's been showing up on my radar for the last about 3 to 4 weeks or so is religion versus relationship.
Yeah.
And everything you just said, it boiled down into those 3 words: religion versus relationship. So which timeline, which path are you choosing? Are you choosing to stay in the religion because maybe it's worked out well for you in the past, but probably more likely than not, and I believe we all speak from experience here, the 3 of us and anyone else listening in the ethers, is that how well has religion served humanity on a grand scale, and how well has it served us each individually? And instead, well, what if we focus on the relationship more than the religion? Yeah. How is that? How is focusing on the relationship?
Yeah, there's so many.
Better.
Yeah, so many people coming out with, they lied to us about Jesus. They lied to us about, like, really, until you turn everything you've been told inside out and upside down, you're going to have a hard time arriving at the truth unless you're willing to deconstruct it all and then allow yourself to be open enough to be taught. Like the moment I did that, I was having vivid dreams. I was being shown, I was getting the narrative corrected. And it came in fast because I believe because I was open and willing, and not so entangled with that old belief system anymore. I was allowing myself to say, what if I don't know anything? What if it's all a lie? And that's scary to deconstruct that way, but you have to, and you're the only one that can do it for you.
Yes.
Well, and that's why people say The Matrix is more of a documentary, because the first question Morpheus asked Neo, what if I told you that everything you were taught to believe has been a lie?
Mm-hmm.
Right in there.
Yeah.
It's right there. But how many of us, as you said, how many of us have been willing to turn things upside down and examine it from different angles and perspectives and really do that? And that's why over the Oracle of Delphi engraved, know thyself.
Yeah. Even if you're familiar, Sarah, are you, or you, Shaggy, are you guys familiar with David R. Hawkins' work, Power versus Force, or any of his other books?
I'd say I'm vague. I have a working knowledge of Power versus Force. Through one of the mentors in my network. He emphasized that because I was having some difficulty with my children at the time and how I relate to them. And that was one of those perspective changing pieces, if you will.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah. As we're on the 144,000 and Bible and religion topic, he shares in there. So he's the one who came out with the scale of consciousness. It's truly like kind of the foundation of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous out there to help people heal. But what he says in Power versus Force and in some of his other books, as he's been able to take and measure the vibration of different things, which is measuring the truth of it. He did that with all these ancient texts, Bible included, and then they broke it down into every book in the Bible. And what's fascinating is he says the only 3 books that actually resonate at like above fear, so up higher on the scale, is Genesis and Proverbs and Psalms. He says those 3 are the only books that actually have a fair amount of truth to them. And here's my take on Genesis. And this only comes after years of being taught in dreams myself. And I call them waking dreams because it will come in while I'm in a sleeping state, but it wakes me right up. And then I sit and I get taught. But I've been truly being shown the Genesis story and the truth in it. And I honestly, until I went back to Power versus Force just in the last few months, I forgot that he even said that in there, but I had pulled my book out and I was reading it. I was like, oh my gosh, because I keep getting taught about Genesis. And I know that that's part of my purpose, is that I came in, I've shared that with you, Sarah, that as this collective. And they often say that is the, like the whole soul. That's not disassociated anymore, but I have this collective that I am, and it's a primordial collective. So I came in to bring and correct the primordial information that has been so twisted. And it's very, very almost scary for me to step into that space, but I can't deny it. And it's been coming in so strong. So anyway, that was interesting. So if any of you like, Revelations really is Genesis backwards and Genesis forward. So the end is just like the beginning. So when you kind of can look at both of those books in that way, just know that tells the whole story of creation, and those imprints, they just repeat. It's a story that repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats. And when we can kind of understand that, instead of only think of it linearly and say, well, it happened all these thousands of years ago. No, it's going on all the time. And when you start to realize you're working it back, then like you brought up twin flames, you're going to come back to the serpent, then you're going to come back to your Adam or your Eve. You're literally working it backwards because everything comes full circle. And so you start to see yourself in the metaphors, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that reminded me, that serpent hospital sign reminds me of the whole Adam and Eve story. And I've never been one I'm kind of like, to me, even as a kid, I'm like, that's just a metaphor. I don't know necessarily, but it's all
It is a metaphor.
yeah.
It's just a truth in the metaphor. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And I feel like a lot of the Bible is that. And I want a lot of my followers and audience to understand that when we say you've got to deconstruct your beliefs completely, this does not mean you've got to deny Jesus if you're a Christian. That's not what we're saying. We're saying everything that you've been taught or that you think you know about Jesus, deconstruct it, put it to the side real quick. A lot of it you may bring back because you'll confirm it and you'll be able to say, oh, yeah, this resonates. Oh, yeah, this is, and yeah, maybe some of this stuff was more parable type stuff and metaphors and et cetera, et cetera. And you're going to come to see that Christ consciousness versus being Christian, quote unquote. There is a big difference between the two of them, and religion doesn't want you to see that. And the truth of the matter is, the truth lies within the Christ consciousness side of it. They want to try to give you a part of it and then use fear tactics, hellfire, brimstone, all of this to enforce control, basically to control. And you've got to realize that we came down. We chose this and we came down as a part of this. There's no way that we are going to choose an experience for ourselves to just be destroyed or this and that. It's so much bigger than what we've been taught and that we can ever possibly realize that it is this thing called religion, which the root word of that is religio, and it means to become enslaved to the law, legalism. And that's what religion is all about. It's about following rules. And I understand that certain rules are there for your protection. For instance, I don't eat shrimp, I don't eat pork. I follow, maybe what's a more kosher type diet with those sort of things now. I never used to be that way, but that just feels like right with me. And I feel like that's what my higher self, my God, wants me to do, is not eat that stuff. And so as an honor to my body, my temple, and to my faith, that's something that I choose not to do. But it's been a part of that deconstruction process of what's appropriate for me, what resonates as right for me, and what doesn't. And I still have my beliefs as Jesus, as my savior, as that light, as that power. And at the same time, I also know him now to be a mystic. I know him now to be a rebel. I know him now to be one who goes in temples and flogs and flips tables. One who is not this fluffy, loving person all the time that he was made to be in the Bible. That's not what this is all about. So once you can realize that you don't have to disown your savior and the person that has held you, your faith belief that has held you through so many hard things in life. That's not what deconstruction is. What deconstruction is basically taking it all apart in pieces and realizing that certain pieces don't belong anymore. Certain pieces were extra, and they're messing up the screws. They're messing up the wheels in your machine, and you need to clean that stuff out. And once you do, things are just going to start flowing for you in understanding, in awareness, and consciousness, and in the alignment in your life overall. I believe that's been my experience.
I love the point both of you are making, and what I did is I pulled up the Bible verse, and Angela, maybe, and Rothy, feel free to as well. Feel free to dovetail off of this. I'm going to read you the passage from the King James Version, Matthew chapter 10, verses 16 and 17, and see how this relates to what we've been talking about. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils, and they will scourge you in their synagogues.
So,
True.
Shaggy, it's so funny that you bring up Matthew 10. I turn people to Matthew 10 all the time. And like later on, it says, I came as a double-edged sword. Like,
Absolutely.
you know, he's saying, and I will cast
Separate.
like daughter against father or mother, and son against father, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. And why? Like, do people actually understand this? Because when you choose to wake up, when you choose to start questioning everything, I experienced this, so I know it's true.
Yeah.
This is part of that primordial experience. I started questioning everything, and I could feel the judgment from my entire family. What are you doing, Angie? Where are you going? Like, how dare you question what you've been taught to believe? And I'm like, well, that's fear speaking right there. And I'm not going to be guided by fear. I get the opportunity and the choice to question everything. To become as a little child is to question everything. And if that means you all turn against me, fine. I'm no longer afraid. I'd rather know for myself than just know what was planted in me, what just kept coming in, you know, after weeks and weeks and weeks of religious upbringing and my parents telling me what to think.
Yes.
So that now I can think for myself. But yes, I love that chapter in scriptures. It's so powerful if you can really understand it.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I've come across this more and more about the 17 years of Jesus's life that are unaccounted for in the Bible. And given that he was from the line of King David, it would be fair to say that he entered this earth. He may have entered through the most modest and humble of means, but that his family and his lineage were that of kings. So he probably had a good deal of prosperity to him. And where did he go? Because there's allegedly documentation of him being in the Himalayas and him visiting these monasteries that are still in existence today. Greg Braden he's one of those guys who's pretty adamant that Jesus and John the Baptist were part of the Essene order. And there's so many great mysteries contained within the story of Jesus in the Bible.
One of my favorites is how it
that
goes.
Relationship, instead of believing the religion, the man-made religion and the man-made narrative,
right?
That relationship will reveal itself as to the truth, because Jesus also stated several times, I am the way, the truth, and the light. No one comes to the Father except through me. I am the gateway.
It's fascinating that like this last summer, I was seeing two women through some plant medicine journey. And in it, you guys, this doesn't happen to me all the time, but in their experience, all of a sudden I had a spirit come and it was talking to me the whole time. And it was saying, and Angie, you need to understand, this was a healing through Christ. And it was my own healings. So my back, and then it talked about my ear, and it like went through all these healings I've experienced and said, that was due to Christ. That was Christ. That was Christ. That was Christ. And I was like, this is blowing my mind. Like I am literally being taught. Now, these other two women were in their plant medicine journey. And at the end, they were totally quiet. At the end, a few hours later, I asked them, how did that go? Like, what was your experience? Because oftentimes people will stay quiet and they'll get taught and they'll be shown some of their own deep traumas and things. And one woman one of the two looks at me and she goes, "That was the wildest experience I've ever had." And I said, "Why?" And she goes, "Well, the moment I dropped into the medicine," she goes, "this spirit just kept saying, hold this space for Christ, hold this space for Christ." She goes, "I'd try to think about my son or think about my husband, and it just kept saying, hold this space for Christ and invite Christ's spirit in." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? That's your experience?" She goes, "Yeah." And I go, "Well, the whole time I was being shown all my healings." And she's like, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah, through Christ." And she goes,
Wow.
"Maybe I was holding the space for you to be taught all that." And I'm like, "Maybe." But, when you open yourself up, you will start to be taught, and it will blow your mind. But
Yeah,
you also put this in there, Shaggy, given the knowledge of Genesis and Revelation, would it be fair to say that we're living in a simulation of sorts?
for
I
sure.
actually believe that. Like with A Course in Miracles, if you're familiar with that,
Hmm.
it talks all about the all the work has been done. I truly believe the last 2,000 years, it has been massive simulation. It's been all holographic. It's really all of us untangling the narratives so that we can get to that one timeline, because with all of us believing all these different things, it's just keeping the chaos going and going and going. And yes, chaos is necessary to get into order, right? And both chaos and order exist in the universe. However, to enter that heart, what the heart is stillness, the mind is chaos. But the mind used correctly can help you get into the heart. So we have to do the mental house cleaning, get rid of the stories that are not serving us, the lies that we've been told, to get back to the stillness of the heart. And so, yeah, I've actually shared with a lot of people recently. I'm like, no, what we're trying to do the last 2,000 years is awaken from the dream, because
Yeah.
it's only been a dream for the last 2,000 years. That's what it is. It's just a dream. Wake up, snap out of it. Like,
It's
and
it's funny you call it a dream. There's a very famous online content creator. Her name is Rachel Elizabeth. She's real funny, beautiful. She's a recovering drug addict, and she's an incredible story. And normally she just does lots of funny posts. She did a very serious one the other day, and I didn't realize that she was one of these people. And I think it goes back to that whole trauma thing. It's the traumatized are the empaths. We're the ones that can tap in because we're the ones that have been cracked, so we know how to do it, right? And it comes
yep.
into us. So it's like with her, what she said was, I just love observing. Like I love watching other people go through their awakening. It's like it's so fascinating to me to see the symptoms happening to them. And even when they're questioning it, I'm like, I get so excited for them because I know what's coming. I know what's happening. And this is what happened to her. She was like, do you guys sometimes just feel like you're not real? Like this isn't real. And
Hmm.
that this is, and it reminds me of this. It reminds me of this whole thing that this realization that I had recently about passing out. I don't know if you've ever passed out before. I know you've had surgery before, and
Yeah.
it's similar, but it's not. It's not the exact same as passing out. But I've passed out a lot in life. I have what's called uh, vagal syncope syndrome or something like that. And so I pass out when they take my blood, and then sometimes I just pass out just for fun, evidently. So, but what happens when you pass out, and this is what it reminded me of with Rachel Elizabeth, was this is the process. It's like you start seeing little black dots, right? And then all of a sudden, this overwhelming sensation in your stomach, in your mind, as you're blacking out. It's like going down a roller coaster, a million miles an hour, super intense. And then you're like, this isn't real. This is not real. This can't be real. This isn't reality. And then you black out. And then when you black out, it is not like sleeping or REM, where there's still some sort of like sleeping computer consciousness, subconscious going on. You are in nowhere land. You don't know that you exist. There's
Yeah.
something when you're sleeping, even when you're sleeping, you still know you exist somehow. Not when you pass out, not when you're under anesthesia, which the process of anesthesia is literally taking somebody to the brink of death and holding them there. That's what it is.
Mhm.
That's why it's so dangerous. But it's like when you come back from that, from passing out, it's almost the opposite process, right? It is that feeling of like super intense, this isn't real, and you come to, and then you're like, whoa, wow, that was a trip. Where did I just go? What just happened? Where am I at? How did I get here? You don't remember it, right? And it's
Yeah.
almost like you're a router that has been reset and that is reconnecting to the simulation. You're reconnecting to the Wi-Fi. And that was just another one of those things that it's like, yeah, I have felt almost like things go slow sometimes. Like everything is slow mo. Sometimes I'll see like a film over everything in my consciousness. Like even in my house, I'll see like a colorful but translucent light film over everything. And I don't know if that's just me or if that is something that happens to other people, but I know when I saw her post in saying that, I resonated with that. Like, yeah. And that's been happening a lot more. Those sort of senses, those sort of symptoms have come into my awareness and have happened to me, and it just further confirms to me that we are in that simulation, and those are the sort of things that happen, you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You know, all the work I've done with that ketamine clinic, it was interesting because I had never experienced ketamine, but in order to write a course for it, I wanted to experience it so I could speak from experience, right? But lo and behold, when I had that nodule removed out of my neck, they used ketamine for my anesthesia. And while I was in the anesthesia, I ended up like coming out and going, wow, how come I'm still here? They told me I'd only be there for 3 hours. And it was like, I was there at 7:30, didn't check me out till 2:30 or 3 p.m. And I asked the nurse, I'm like, why am I the last one to leave the surgical center? I was the first one in. You guys said it would only be 3 hours. And she said, oh, when you came out, you had a strong emotional release. Like you just kept bawling. And when my husband came back to get me, I said, that was trippy. I said, while I was in anesthesia, I was sitting in a grand council. And the council, like the only thing I could remember when I came out was they kept saying, do you know who your husband is? You've got to remember who your husband is. And I'm like, yeah, it's Stephen. Okay, now you're going to want to remember this when you wake up. Remember this when you wake up. And I'm like, okay. So the funny thing is with the Stella procedure, they also say when you get these injections in the side of your neck, it causes a strong emotional release. And it's because of all the trauma you've been holding in, you finally purge it. But that's what that made me think of as you were sharing that, because we really are in this altered state. You're tapping into consciousness instead of this that we call like, this is more your human lens put over your consciousness, right? With all of your beliefs and all these structures you've built up. And when we're talking about deconstructing it, we're saying you got to deconstruct all of that. Just bring it all down. Let the curtain fall. So you are no longer in any type of an illusion that, and it does come down to your wounds and your pains and all of that stuff. But yeah, what you're describing, because I've been a shaman for a number of years, is what people experience in plant medicine too. It lets down the veil of illusion, and all of a sudden you can see things, and you often see sacred geometry in that space. You often see colors more vibrant, or some people, I personally have seen it, the matrix. I've seen the matrix all around, and I'm like, wow, it's there. Like there is a fabric right over us, right? And it's really that hologram.
Yes,
So.
that's what I'm saying. I see it, and to me, what it looks like, it's like if it's like there's color to it, but it's also clear, and it's a luminescent light of the structure of everything, and it covers everything, and it changes colors, and it's colors that I've never seen before.
Yep.
I can't explain it in any other way. I've never heard of any. We can see you.
Crap. Because I can't see my notes, and it's really frustrating. I'll have to use my phone flashlight for this.
That's okay.
But that is,
yeah, like, I see that. I see it everywhere. I didn't know anybody else could see it.
Yeah, well, and most people don't with their naked eye, but there are some people that have. They've cracked that and been able to do that, And then you talk about like all the timeline jumping or the timelines collapsing. It's like, if you guys have watched the Loki series on Disney Plus, that is fascinating because that's all it's about. And it's a very short series. And I don't watch a lot of TV, but someone told me, you got to go watch this, Angie, you'll get it. And I watched it and I was like, oh yeah, this is absolutely like when you learn you can pause time. I had an experience this last summer with my husband that we went to eat at a restaurant we hadn't eaten at in like 3 years from the moment we first met. And then the time in between that first time to that restaurant and the second time, things just got really messy. And when we showed up at this restaurant the second time, they took us in and he said, I got to use the restroom. And I remembered right then, the first time we went there, he said the same thing as we were being taken to our table. So he left and went to the restroom. I got taken to the table alone. And when I sat down in the same seat I sat down in it before. They sat us at the exact same table. And there's tons of tables at this restaurant. And I was like, okay, wait, I just realized we sat down at the same table and I sat in the same seat, and I'm going to watch what he sits at when he comes back to the table. And he chose the same seat. And in that moment, I told him, I said, we are having a second chance at something right now because we literally are reliving what we lived 3 years ago. So we're just like hopping timelines, right? Going right back to right before things started to get a little messy. And I'm like, we're getting a new start. And he looked at me like I was just off my rocker a little bit. Like, he's like, really? And I go, well, did you remember sitting at this table before? He's like, yeah. And I go, you remember you sat right there? And he goes, oh my gosh. And I go, I only remember because of my view. I can remember seeing all these other tables, exactly how they're set up now. And so anyway, that kind of stuff will happen, but awareness arrives before even the event. So can you have the awareness? Are you paying attention that much to notice before things really start to unfold, right? And you'll start to see it and you'll know, we're having a do-over right now. We're going to get this done right this time, or whatever.
Think that that's related to deja vu? When people have deja vu, is that a similar message that maybe you get another chance to do something again?
Sometimes I think in deja vu that I'm open to any other ideas about it, but I feel like deja vu is just somebody realizing another timeline, not necessarily, because usually with deja vu, we don't usually, at least this is my experience, pick a new outcome. We just go, whoa, I think I've been here before. It's like, maybe hopping in and out of that timeline. But whereas this one was like, there was not deja vu. I just was like, wow, as this is unfolding, we've done this before. I noticed the people were different. I knew we were in a new time, but the entire event was being set up the same, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's a perfect segue into my next question for you. And I'm going to let you kind of go into it how deep and, however you want to. But one of the biggest things that I am fascinated with you and have always been is the quantum entanglement expertise that you have. So with that being said, what do you think people should look for as far as signs of symptoms of entanglement, quantum entanglement, those sort of things, especially when possibly dealing with potential soulmates or twin flame type situations? Do you believe in those sort of soul connections? Just kind of talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah, well, it's a broad topic. I do believe in them, and I also believe that because of them, because of entanglements, we also would call that karma. Like you create an entanglement when it's not you've not experienced something in its highest possibility, like in unconditional love. And so maybe you have a messy relationship, maybe you have a fight, maybe you quit a job, flip your boss off and walk out and leave them high and dry about something, like there's all kinds of different things that can create entanglements. And it's fun that Shaggy mentioned Greg Braden. I love what Greg Braden says I think it's in the Divine Matrix, his book, but he says that in order to untangle entanglement, you need to handle things in kindness, caring, compassion, and love. And I 100% agree, because an entanglement is like it's a mess. It's a knotted up like mess because all the emotions got involved and you couldn't like work through them together, and be conscious. Like a conscious connection could be a couple, could be again a parent child, boss, friend, whatever. And so when you walk away from those experiences, leaving it entangled, in other words, then that's when you're going to have to come back to this at some point. It's not finished until you can untangle that entanglement, until you can learn to, like we talk about attachment in the awakened community, until you can learn to unattach in a healthy way and realize, like their stuff's about them. My stuff's about me. I get to own my stuff. But as long as I don't walk away from this carrying all this hatred and anger and it's them and now I'm a victim, like that's going to keep you entangled in it. It's the story. And if you pay attention to the stories you're telling yourself, you'll know if you have an entanglement or not, because you can't put it down. You can't let it go, and some people like to think that as long as they don't talk about it in their reality, but still their mind is going crazy, that doesn't make it go away. Like you actually have to make peace with it. You have to truly let go. And that's when you'll know it's no longer a part of you, is when it's not driving the show. You're not feeling like you got to tell everyone and talk about it. And I've been guilty of those things. I've had many situations in my life where I've realized, oh, wow, there's that story showing up again. And so you just have to let go of it. But the symptoms of entanglement, like, I don't know that really the best symptoms I think that I would point people to is pay attention to your inner dialogue, pay attention to what you're constantly playing over in your mind or sharing out loud. Those will be 2 clues. But then also they can show up in your body, because the body is a reflection of what's going on inside. My back pain, for instance, was a story, and then it came down through generations, but it really was mine to heal. And then I've had another relationship with a gentleman who I ran into him like literally like clockwork. Every 6 to 12 months, we'd just bump into each other somewhere in the public, and we don't even live closer than like 45 minutes to each other, and we were just always running into each other, but we were high school sweethearts. And so I'm like, why do we keep running into each other? And I've seen a past life where we were married, and he was in a plane crash. It was in one of the world wars. I haven't been able to place exactly which time. And he went down with his plane, and they never found his body. And I saw myself promise in that life, I will not rest until I find you. And once I saw that timeline, I literally ran into him again like 2 weeks later. And the first words out of his mouth, he goes, "Why do you keep finding me?" And I go, "Why do you think I'm finding you? Maybe you're finding me." And he goes, "No, it feels like you're finding me." And I thought that was very interesting when I saw myself make that promise. I won't rest till I find you. And I've been finding him everywhere, since, except for after that, haven't bumped into him again. It was almost like the wrapping up of it. And that's been 3 or 4 years. So that's the longest it's been since, that was going on. And so I know that was, and now I'm a beginner at learning evolutionary astrology, and my chart does say that I would have had a very painful love situation that I would not have been able to let go of. And I'm like, that's so funny. That's that one that showed up, So anyway, yeah, so there's lots of clues and lots of symptoms, but they say in astrology that your entire birth chart is karmic. Like, just look at it and it will tell you what you came here to experience is all because you're always balancing things. Don't think of karma as a bad thing. Karma is just the lessons you need to learn and to become more conscious of. And so when you can look at it that way, it's not so sad or scary or like heavy. It's really just, we're all conscious beings looking to become more conscious and have more and more and more experiences until we reach that state of enlightenment and we understand like everything in its fullness.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a beautiful way to put that. Um, yeah, that just sums up the entire experience of the awakening and the spiritual journey, which is beautiful. It is painful, but there's also beauty in that pain, and um,
Well, and
I love watching people go through it.
yeah, and that entanglement, I mean, just think of it this way. Everything's a co-creation. Nothing comes into your life without coming in and through another vehicle. Like you don't go to the grocery store and buy something off a shelf that someone else didn't put on the shelf for you. Like everything is a co-creation, and in those co-creations, we can end up entangled if you walk away from it in a really negative space instead of looking for the higher lesson, the higher takeaway, the higher, purpose. And so the more you start to attune to that, which is love, then you'll start to be able to experience things from that perspective. And I tell people everything's love. Like if you think that love only looks like rainbows and unicorns, then you're missing 95% of all the love showing up. Sometimes someone walking away is love. Sometimes,
Somebody hurting somebody is love. It may not look that way, but
right.
It's because of a lack of love, or it's surrounding love. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Big stuff.
Yeah.
Big stuff. Well, I want to go to a couple of questions if we can really quickly before we let you go for the evening. We got a couple of good ones here. How do you feel? Obviously, we know a little bit about how you feel, but about plant medicine being a new way to treat veterans with PTSD, and are you an advocate of that? If so, why?
I am a big advocate of that. One, I believe plants were put on the earth for our good, and yeah, as human beings, we try to understand them more and more and more. But I just kind of chuckle that we've been so conditioned to accept and receive and use pharmaceuticals that mostly are poison and have 50 plus side effects every time you take them, versus most plants. And I couldn't even share, like maybe you guys can throw it up there. I've got a chart that's been put together that talks about like what plants and how, well, all the plants, and then how addictive they are, or what types of injuries have occurred in use of them and things like that. Most
Right.
plant medicines are not addictive, believe it or not. And so most, not all, but most are not. They are actually helping you heal. They're helping you awaken. I love the work that Michael Pollan has done with How to Change Your Mind. This great book that he wrote about a decade ago, but then he came out with a Netflix short series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he shares what has been occurring with specifically with veterans and MDMA, which is not a plant, but it does have a base of mescaline. And so anyway, with these plants medicines, I've witnessed many people. I've had people write in my presence that have healed, like one gentleman, he healed asthma, that he was in his 40s, diagnosed with asthma at 9, healed his asthma in one journey. And it's never returned. And so some people, that one was psilocybin. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So, now that gentleman had done an ayahuasca journey, like I think a number of months before he came to me to do psilocybin. And I have a little trick up my sleeve that I play with people. I ask them, so I tell them, tell me about your childhood in 5 minutes or less. And with this gentleman, he just riddled this off really fast. He goes, at 3, I was, my parents got divorced. At 6, I was sucker punched in the belly, woken from a deep sleep from a brother that was twice my age, so 12. And then he goes, at 9, I was diagnosed with asthma. And at 16, that same brother put my head through a window. And I said, wow, that's a lot of trauma. And he goes, yeah. But when he dropped into the medicine, which was 3 hours earlier, he started breathing deep, like someone in a breathwork class, and he did not stop for hours. So when he told me this about his childhood, I looked at him and the first thing out of my mouth was, I said, "Oh, so you're healing your asthma tonight?" And he goes, "What?" And I go, "You're healing your asthma." And he goes, "How do you know?" And I said, "Well, your subconscious just streamed all 4 of those pieces together, which means they're all connected to one another. And I truly believe that your parents getting divorced knocked the wind out of your cells. Then your brother knocked it out again, because traumas repeat. They just look different each time. So your brother sucker punching you knocked it out the second time. Then you were diagnosed with asthma at 9. The asthma is a symptom of the pain you felt when your parents got divorced. That's it. Like, it's that trauma, and it's that simple. And I've had people come to me. I'm not a therapist, but I understand the subconscious like deeply, and it's came from my own healing. And I've had other people come to me and said, I've asked like dozens of therapists to help me get to the bottom of this, and they usually don't. And I'll say that one question, and then I see what they say in return, and I go, okay, this is what's going on. And it hits. So, and it really is a 5-minute, like, it's kind of like the whole Byron Katie, loving what is. Mine is, tell me about your childhood in 5 minutes or less, and I'll help you stream it all together.
Little, what do they call those things? Like a little life hack, a little therapy hack for you. That's really, really, it's a great question. And everything stems from that. It's so true that everything stems from that. And the traumas from the beginning, that's such a great point. And I never thought about it that way. The traumas from the beginning are going to repeat themselves in different ways. They're going to look different and feel different.
That's why, as human beings, we have a hard time seeing the traumas repeat. Like, some people are saying, well, my trauma when I got divorced and my trauma. And I'm like, and it's connected to your childhood trauma. Everything is just a repeat of your childhood. And whether you have the eyes to see it or not is another thing, but it really is just repeating.
That's a big one. That's a big one right there, Bars. Okay. So second question from our guest questioner here. Can you explain the polar opposites to people, the meaning of balance? So something good happens and something must balance on the opposites. I guess the duality, so to speak.
So I call it, it is duality. I call it the law of exchange. And so, and again, this actually just goes right back to karma. Like, if you experience it on this end, in order to understand it, you need to experience it on the other end. So contrast is our greatest teacher. And so there's on this plane anyway, there's always going to be contrast. And in the religion I was brought up in, they called it opposition. Opposition's going to show up. And I'm like, yeah, it is. And now, like, when you can understand that, then you start to go, oh, okay, this is all for my good. None of it's for the detriment of myself. It's like everything is for my growth and learning and expansion as a spirit. And so you're going to have opposites show up. You're going to be taught through contrast. And so you just don't want to reject it. You want to see, just like Shaggy said earlier, like, how is this working for me, not to me? Yeah.
No, thank you for explaining that, because that's what so many of us seemingly get hung up on. I mean, we want to focus on the good, but we don't want to be bothered with the bad or the ugly. But unless you have that contrast or have that exposure, how does one determine if it's good or bad or ugly or otherwise without that?
Right.
Without those choices being presented to us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I do apologize I had to put the dog in her crate because she was being
That's
antsy.
okay.
So,
yeah.
Okay, well, my last question would be, this is a kind of a big one. I can't believe we haven't done this before, but on our future as a people, as a species, as a simulation, and let's see here, let's show this. And your advice to humanity. So Angela's advice to humanity. what you are looking forward to, what you are looking for in the future to happen, what you feel may be, and what your advice is to others.
Wow. Well, I've never been asked about future casting like that. One, your consciousness is creating your reality. So your future, like really what's going to come is up to you. So be prepared, and start attuning yourself really to what is of your highest and best good, and just knowing that everything is teaching you. So I just keep trying to return to love myself. I know that as a collective, the last 2+ years, 2 to 4 or 5 more, whatever, has been a wild ride for many people. And I've had lots of people I've known that have chosen out. They've either committed suicide or sad things like that. And just try to look at your experience and the world at large with more curiosity instead of judgment and definitive, like, this is what's going on. Say, I'm curious what's going on, and really try to get your heart in alignment with that, just a curiosity. And then you take on that observer viewpoint instead of attaching to an outcome. That just will cause you to have so much more peace in your life, to observe what's going on instead of kind of join in the mess. If it feels like it's a mess, then just observe it. That's really probably the best advice I have, because I'm not going to say I know exactly where we're going. As humanity, I do feel strongly that there is a sifting that's happening right now, and that just like a lot of individuals, channelers, and different people, that I do believe there's going to be like a separating that's like, call it the separation of the wheat and the tares. I don't care what you call it, but it's a sifting, and it's a separating of a certain type of consciousness and another type of consciousness. And if you are attuned to that love, then that's going to be the direction you head. If you're attuned to the fear narratives and the lies and things like that, then you're entangled in that truly, then that's the direction you're going to go, because that's where your consciousness is at. So that's kind of my viewpoint.
Beautiful. I love that. And I think I'm going to take a lot of that for me personally. I think that is probably one of the phases that I'm in right now, is finalizing the understanding that I don't need to be in the fear. I've done a lot of, I know I've done correct, I've predicted correctly through numerology and dates and stuff like that. And that's good to a certain extent, but what can I do with that? And instead I feel like now, if I can redirect that energy and help others to look a different way, and help them to understand that if we pull our energies together, we focus on the positive, that we can absolutely change the course of history. We absolutely can thwart things that, that others may be planning, or that we may be fearing, or what have you. If it's not in our consciousness, then it doesn't exist within a quantum world. So I absolutely love that. And I think that's a great way for humanity to go.
Rothy, you brought up the last question I typed out. So this is for you, Angela, and Rothy, feel free to contribute. How might one be better able to detach themselves from the negativity of what's currently going on around us? I wrote current events for better lack of a term. So how does one potentially jump from the fear frequency over to the faith frequency? Is there a sort of hack that you've noticed for that?
Well, your 5 physical senses are what's driving you most of the time. And that's if you're in more of a carnal state. That's your energy, and it's coming in and through you. But if you can rise above that and create space between stimulus and response, there's stimulus every time you hear a news story. There's stimulus every time you hear about a local event or a world event. there's so much stimulus that we're in a state right now where you can't really get away from it, especially if you carry any of your electronic devices with you and things like that. You really personally have to choose to unplug more often and do other things like meditate and take a walk in nature or a hike. Really connecting with your animals or with nature, and quieting your mind and quieting all that stimulus. That if people could do that, and that's asking a lot. There's not a lot that are going to be willing to do that. They're like, nope, I'd rather go out with my friends to the bar on Friday. Go for it. There's going to be a lot of stimulus there. I'm not saying stop living, but as you're deconditioning yourself, which everyone needs to go through a deconditioning process, and they say that usually 7 years is what it takes to truly decondition yourself and be working at it consciously.
Wow.
So that's a creation cycle. So if it takes you 7 years to decondition, then for that 7 years, you do need to be more committed to your own mental and emotional health and doing the things that will quiet your life instead of stay in this hyperdrive, because there is a lot going on. And luckily, that was one of the good positive takeaways of the COVID years is people, stores weren't open as often, like the clubs weren't open as often, like everything just kind of got shut down. And really, if you want to look for how's this working for me, like during those years, I was taking walks every morning, and I was like, I don't have anywhere to go to work anyway, so I'm working from home. I'm just gonna, do a little me. And so I call it self-care,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love that. Really, that's the first thing I thought of too. I was like, I've been kind of put in this 2 to 3 year phase of my life that I'm really coming out of, where I had moved to the country and I've been very isolated since pretty much 2020, even before I moved out there. And of course, just one trauma after another happened to me out there, and I was like, what was this a mistake going out there? Why is all of this happening? It was a snowball of just unforeseen traumatic events, including the loss of my father, starting out with the loss of my father unexpectedly. And so it was really a time I knew that I was being set aside. I knew that I was being isolated for some reason. I hated it. But at the same time, I was able to do so much growing and self-searching, soul-searching, and finding out who I really am still, and what's important, what I really want, and honestly, what my purpose is. It was my platform for purpose. I'm back from that, and now I'm like, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to invest my purpose and my skills and my abilities into somebody else's dream to help make them millions. No, I have a purpose. I've been giving gifts. I've been doing this, and I want to help humanity, and I want to help creation. And I know that if I follow that purpose, that my sustenance will come, aka the money. You know what I mean? That will come. Yeah. If I'm living my purpose, and that's what this is. That's what the whole episode, that's what the whole podcast is me being able to help fulfill my purpose, and getting this information to humanity by bringing such amazing guests like yourself on to share with the world your gifts, your talents, your light. So thank you so much once again, my beautiful friend, for sharing your time and your light and your love with us. Shaggy, is there any last questions that you have for Miss Angela before we go?
Yes, and I'm gonna go jump off what you just mentioned, Rothy. About 6 months ago, I was going through a very painful episode, and I decided to go within, as painful as it was, to discipline myself to sit down and write something on paper. And what I wrote after a little journaling, I just big question, big print. How do we transform pain into power? And much of what you just mentioned, Angela, can provide us a roadmap for how we can do that, to detach from the toxic religious programming, to detach from like the parenting, and like say the early childhood traumas and then the late childhood traumas. When you see that there's certain patterns that go in cyclical nature, then if we were to take a step back, that can truly be transformative in itself. So I want to thank you for that. My follow up question is, how does one get in touch with you? Do you have an Instagram, social media? How can people maybe reach out to you to delve a little further into what you do?
Yeah, right now, honestly, it's so funny. I've had Spirit tell me so many times, like, don't worry about this and don't worry about that. And so I am digitizing all my coaching courses right now. So those will be
Awesome.
available after the new year. And I've got 3, a 6, and a 12-month different courses, beginners, intermediate, and advanced. And then you can reach out to me on social media. I don't have a website yet. I've just
Don't need one.
needed one. Yeah, never felt like I've needed one. It will be live actually after all these are digitized. But yeah, you can reach out to me on Facebook. I'm under Angela Kirkham, just like Rothy put my name up at the beginning. And then my Instagram, this is so funny. I use it all the time and I never remember my handle, but I think it's Angela Dawn Kirkham on Instagram right now. So
Okay. I'm gonna follow you.
so, and then you guys can also, you can reach out to me on my email is Angela Dawn at enlightenu.com. And that's
Okay. Angela, thank you so much for your time. It's been very valuable and informative. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your time and your light and your energy. It's greatly appreciated.
it's been so fun. You two are a joy. Like you are a fun couple to sit and chat with, and you guys are going to do awesome things with this podcast.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, friend. I so appreciate you. We're gonna have you on again because we need
I'd
to
love
go into
to.
websites and all of that other fun stuff you and me did last time. So
Oh
we'll get
yeah.
it scheduled soon.
Okay.
But thank you so much again, Angela. We love you to pieces, and we'll talk soon, friend. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
We'll
Thank
see you
you.
guys. All right. Bye-bye.
All right.
Did you stop the